The Big Show.
You know, I bet most of you are, and I know he's been on the show before, but I bet most of you are very familiar with, and every year I ask you this, Mike, Spotrac or Spotrac? It's Spotrac, right?
Spa. It's the latter.
Ah!
Yeah. We'll take it
Refresh
anyway.
my memory on why.
On why it is it? It's the spot
why it's Spotrac.
Yeah, it's the spot for sports contracts smashed together 15 years ago today. We're going to celebrate it tonight with beers. So, it was
15
gimmicky.
years ago today?
Cute. Yeah, literally it's their anniversary. So you're kicking off a big day for us here at Spotrac, Ross.
That is amazing, dude. That is awesome. 15 years. Congratulations, Mike. That's incredible. So it is the place to go for contract information, period. Like I have it bookmarked on my web browser. Anytime I need to look up any player's contract, boom, I go right there, Spotrac. The key is at the top. It's so easy to just search. It's just so awesome. Absolutely awesome. Love everything you got going. It's funny because number one trending player right now is J.J. Watt. I was going to ask this question, but I don't really need to. I could just look it up. How much money has he made in his NFL career? 130 million, huh? 130 million. And that's, of course, just from his NFL player contracts.
Yeah, 130. I think he might make a little more here. He's got 2 weeks to get a half a sack, which gets him an extra 250,000. So he's fourth most in defensive history right now. 130 million J.J. Watt.
Who's he behind?
Calais Campbell, Ndamukong Suh, and I'm forgetting one. Make it a trivia question, Ross. I'm forgetting one for you, man.
I got it. We will do a trivia question. That is interesting though, because those guys I don't think are as good of players as he's been.
No, he took a little less the last 5-6 years on that Houston team with Deshaun and his contract. But look, look, he's not having the long career that some of these other defensive players have had to have. Calais Campbell's bounced around here for a couple of years on 1-year deals. I'm kind of happy that Watt's not going to do that. He's not going to bounce around and be a journeyman for the next 5 years. So I like the decision.
In fairness, Calais Campbell's still kind of playing his you-know-what off.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he's still good. He's been in Baltimore the last few years. It's amazing how good he is. But that's interesting. So after we post this, Mike, you got to reply with who the third guy is.
Okay, I'll get you there.
You got to look it up and reply because now I'm sure I can just search it on your site, which is amazing. So there's a bunch of reasons I wanted to have you on, Mike. The biggest one, though, is probably some of these quarterback contracts. And they fall into a couple different categories, one of which is guys that are showing they are starting quarterbacks, but not necessarily long-term franchise quarterbacks, and what their teams or the market might do with them contractually. In my head, Mike, and I'm sure I'm not right, but that's why I have you on. In my head, it feels like you are either cemented as a franchise guy and you get over 40 million a year, or you're like a high-end backup and you get like 7 or 8 million a year. I know there are guys in between, and you're going to tell me who they are, but I can't remember who they are. And it just feels like there's this crazy wide abyss between those two categories.
No, that is the conversation to be having. And it's a really important offseason to change that. There's only one guy who's worth kind of any kind of discussion, and it's Tannehill. Tannehill's the only guy that sits in the middle of this pack right now, and you can take him or leave him right now. You're referring to Daniel Jones. You're referring to Geno Smith, right? That's where we're about to get you here. It's those two guys that we have, even me, who I literally live and breathe this stuff. I don't know precisely how to attack these guys with evaluation because the league just doesn't have a spot for them right now. You're right. It's total boom or bust, and it's got to change. We've got to have room for $25 million quarterbacks in this league because we just don't have 32 franchises that can go 40 million a year and keep themselves afloat. So it's a really important offseason for those kind of players. I might put Baker Mayfield in this conversation if he kind of finishes strong here, though there might be a different avenue for him. but that's where we have to be. Look, you don't have to be 8-year contracts to be a franchise quarterback. I'm all for these bridge deals for 2-3 years, maybe fully guaranteed between 22, 25 million for somebody like Daniel Jones, who's still a maybe. And it's okay to be a maybe. You don't have to be a slam dunk after 4 years in the NFL and have to be forced into $45 million contracts if you're a front office. So it's an important offseason for those kind of situations because the NFL has just sort of abandoned them.
So, boy, I got a lot of questions.
Mm-hmm.
What is the franchise tag for quarterbacks next year? Because part of me thinks, Mike, that maybe there is a team out there that would give Daniel Jones or Geno Smith into the 30 million plus a year because they played well this year. But what's the franchise tag where their team could say, nah, you know what? We'll keep you here for one more year.
Yeah, it's a razor thin margin, in my opinion. The non-exclusive tag right now projects to 32 million. And that exclusive tag that we think Lamar is going to get is 45 million. So there's a big gap there. So if we're talking the Jones Smith route, it's about 32 and change just to keep him on the roster in February with that tag. I think you're right. I think there's a team like Washington, especially in division with Daniel Jones, who would overpay to take him away from the Giants, leaving them with essentially nothing. So it's close to whether the Giants, whether the Seahawks want to go that $32 million route, because remember, that's cap that hits immediately. Even if they don't sign that franchise tag, they have to be able to apply that cap March 15th just to keep those guys on the roster. So it's a razor thin margin of do you play with fire, let those guys walk and see if somebody can reset their market above where you want to be, or do you try to get something done right now and figure it out?
Well, I guess the way I look at it, Mike, is if you're Seattle or the Giants, who else are you going to get?
That's right.
Who else are you going to get that you think is going to perform better than these guys performed? They're not top 10 quarterbacks, but they've performed as quality starters this year. And you wouldn't think they'd be worse in year 2 for Daniel Jones with Brian Daboll and his offense, or year 2 for Geno kind of being the guy in tail. Although he's trailed off a little bit, these last few games. That's interesting. So right now, are you telling me the only guy between 10 million a year and 40 million a year is Ryan Tannehill at quarterback?
For the most part, Kirk Cousins is just under that $40 million mark. He's not going to be for long. They're going to lock him in this offseason. But when we're talking about starting quarterbacks, it's rookie deals, Ryan Tannehill and Kirk Cousins, and then Derek Carr and up, which are $40 million quarterbacks. So it's really gone crazy the last 3 off seasons. And you're right. There's just no middle ground. And that's dangerous. The NBA had this happen, Ross, and it got real dangerous for a couple of years there where you had a 2% class and then the rookie wage scale, and the middle class was just totally toast. And I don't want the NFL to get there because the middle class, as you know, in the NFL is 45 to 48 guys on a roster. It's not just 6 guys sitting on a bench in an NBA team. So it's a dangerous water we're getting into here. But I do think this is an offseason that can start to change that mindset, which is good. I don't think everybody's worth $40 million in this league.
Yeah, well, I don't know that anybody's going to give them that, but somebody might.
They might have
the thing.
to.
Like,
yeah, you're right.
Like, it's possible. I don't know if it's Carolina. I don't know what team it is, but there are going to be a team out there, and probably more likely for Daniel Jones than Geno Smith. But I can see a team giving Daniel Jones $40 million a year. Maybe it's not the guarantees, maybe it's not super long, but it's the average per year that I'm sure he and his agent would love to get.
You know what else? And this is very NBA-ish as well. Get him done, keep him here, make it look like it's a big, huge stinking deal. Everybody's tradable right now. Carson Wentz has been traded twice. Sam Darnold's been traded. Baker Mayfield's been traded. Zach Wilson's going to be traded. You know what I mean? Even the worst of the worst are tradable right now, regardless of the contract situation. Carson Wentz's contract was awful the last 2 times he's been traded, and he was still moved for a high-end draft pick. So I think front offices are starting to understand that's how powerful this position is, where we can pay these guys $60 million for 2 years on a $180 million contract, and let somebody else deal with the last 2 to 3 years of this deal and figure it out from there. So nobody's thinking 5-6 years anymore. And that's how it should be. This is a 2 to 3 year window. And for a team that's in that pocket, the Giants are kind of nibbling at that contention window. Washington's sort of sitting there with that defense and a couple of weapons. So there are teams that I think will go stupid on the overall contract for a quarterback that's not worth it, just to see if it could be that one little upgrade that gets them over the hump in 2023.
Wanted to ask you, Mike, about Matthew Stafford, because I talked about this a couple weeks ago when he was on his wife's podcast. What a time to be alive, by the way. When he was on his wife's podcast and said that he that he's not going to retire. Correct me if I'm wrong. He has a lot of money tied into injury guarantees. And if you say you're retiring,
that's right.
You don't get it.
No, that's right.
If you continue to rehab, continue to try to play, you get the money. Like, in other words, even if he's not playing football again, he's not saying he's retiring, correct?
Okay, so I'm going to bury a lead for the podcast I'm about to post later today, man, because I just sort of worked this out in my head just like you did. And I went even one step further. You're definitely right. The second that Matthew Stafford hits March 17th, $68.5 million basically fully guarantees. He's not walking away from that, even though he's made an absurd amount of money from his rookie contract before the rookie wage scale and all that. He's made a ton of money on the field. He's just not walking away from $70 million in front of you. I also don't think he's ever going to be 100% healthy again. We've seen these neck injuries. We saw what happened with Peyton and those kind of contusion issues. It just doesn't bode well for mid-30s guys coming back from this injury. The Rams probably know this. Everybody's kind of in the same camp right now. Is there a world where Matthew Stafford plays when he's available, but they don't overdo it, and Baker Mayfield is just a QB1A on that roster? I think we're walking ourselves down this path right now, where Baker gets a Rams contract to facilitate Matthew Stafford's injury and then eventually to take the keys and take over this roster. It's perfectly plausible. You can see Sean McVay sort of saying out loud publicly how much he respects and is getting along with this situation right now. And if Stafford's injury is essentially career, not threatening, but, confusing for the next couple of years, he's not walking away from $70 million. So the Rams will have to deal with it, and they can deal with it by adding another good quarterback to facilitate that process.
Yeah, I'll be very curious to see whether or not Matthew ever plays again. What I was confused about, as a guy that my career ended with a bruised spinal cord, a little confused that they say he can keep playing without having surgery, because something bruised his spinal cord, and usually you need surgery to correct whatever that was, so that so it doesn't happen again.
And I hate to be conspiracy hot take guy, but do you think he's going to wait till the very last minute to make that surgery decision? We see it a lot with baseball, where guys get to spring training and realize, hey, this is probably worse than it should be. And why put myself through this arduous marathon of a season when I can just have surgery and also get paid? I'm not saying Stafford's going that route and trying to just bag his money without playing again, but there's certainly a reason for the delay. And when you have financial security in front of you, it's probably a good reason to do it.
Speaking of financial security, wanted to ask you about both Russell Wilson and Deshaun Watson, two different categories here on some level. But Russell Wilson, I've seen a lot of people say they're stuck with him for 2 more years, or they're stuck with him for 1 more year. But they could also, cut him, make him post June 1st, take an inordinate amount of dead cap money this year and next year, but at least be out from under it and move on, right?
No, not in my personal opinion. This is a 4-year guarantee, Ross. It's $104 million. However you slice it, that's what's left in guaranteed cash on this thing. It's you want to write that check right now, because that's what you'd have to do. You'd have to basically pony up $104 million cash right now up front, and that doesn't get split up into post June 1st. That's cash. That's accelerated salary that has to hit 2023. So it's impossible right now to move on. You want to find a trade partner and you want to toss in a first round pick and get him out the door. That's a conversation we can start to have. Although I can't even imagine there's a franchise that would do that right now. But we are, in my opinion, 2 years away from having this conversation about them buying out the rest of his contract. And it's not even about dead cap. It's about hard cash right now, because that cash hits immediately. There's no flexibility with how you spread that out over the cap. So I think this is a conversation we just have to wait on. Unfortunately, I know it's the hot burning item right now because Russ is just a disaster. And that Denver team as a whole is just a disaster. But they're gonna try to patch this with a coach and understand that this contract is absolutely lock and key. And we're I think a few months away from seeing the same situation in Arizona. By the way, I mean Kyler Murray's 5 years guaranteed out right now, and there's no getting out of that either. So there's going to be a lot of fixing other items because the quarterback is locked in around the league.
What? Okay, I want to make sure I understand.
Yeah.
So why can't it be a post June 1st even next year?
So the only thing that post June 1st are the bonuses, right? So there's an option bonus, there's a signing bonus. So that can get split into two. But the actual guaranteed cash, the salary, the base salary that's fully guaranteed, and there's 3 more years of it. The second you cut a guy, all of that accelerates into the current year. So obviously it'll be less next year to do it. But right now that's $60 million. Okay. There's a ton of base salary built into these bonuses. So you can finagle it, and, I'll get the numbers for you and I'll tweet them out for you after we talk here to give you the actual post June 1st release this and next year. But I'm just telling you right now, we're talking 50, 60, 70 million of dead cap in 1 year to do that right now. It's not feasible.
What about Deshaun Watson? I know his contract's fully guaranteed. I guess my question is, how much is his performance so far this year? And I realize it's only been 4 games, 5 games, whatever it's been. How much does that hurt a guy like Lamar Jackson or anybody else looking for these fully guaranteed deals?
Yeah, it needed to be a home run for Lamar to even talk about that. And I realize that's a lot to ask for his situation out of the gate after not playing for 18 months. His decision, of course, for half of it. We're just not there. We're not at fully guaranteed contracts. Certainly not in the 4 to 5 to 6 year range. You want to start talking about 2 to 3 years like Aaron Rodgers just did. I think that's a feasible conversation to start having. But we're just not there, and this was another step back. The Kirk Cousins contract 5 years ago was a big step back, even though he's really rounded into form. And this is just another version of that. We got to give him 1 more year, obviously, and that might be a situation where they patch some other things to try to fix it. But it was reckless when it was signed. It's no matter what happens, even if they win a Super Bowl, most front offices in this league are going to look at that situation and say that was reckless in every regard.
Wow. Well, I don't really picture them winning a Super Bowl. That would surprise me. Make sure you follow this man on social media. I'm a big fan. He's my go-to guy. It's at Spotrac, Spotrac. I need to go in the penalty box for starting out. I always call it Spotrac, but for some reason I thought in my head I'm wrong. It's Spotrac. He told me last time it's Spotrac. So Spotrac. Mike, 15 years is incredible. Congratulations. That is awesome. I had obviously no idea when I brought you on the show that it was your anniversary, but that's awesome, man. That's quite the accomplishment.
I appreciate it, man. It's been awesome to see you blow up as well. Love seeing you everywhere.
Trying, man. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
You bet. Let's do it again.